The NFL just dropped a truckload of clues. And for Niners news, this is where the story starts getting spicy. Before the full schedule even comes out, San Francisco 49ers news already has enough material to chew on. And the biggest thing is simple. This team is not just traveling a lot. It is traveling in a way that could shape the whole season. You already know the headline games, and they are the kind of games that make you stop and stare for a second. First up, the 49ers are heading to Melbourne, Australia, to face the Rams in Week 1. That is not your everyday road trip. Not even close. That is the kind of trip that makes your calendar look like it got hit by a meteor. And then, just when you think the schedule could not get any stranger, San Francisco gets a home game in Mexico City against the Vikings in Week 11. That is a home game, sure, but it is also a home game that is not happening at Levi's Stadium. That matters. That absolutely matters. And here is where the whole thing gets interesting for any real Niners fan. These are not just quirky international games designed to sell jerseys and generate headlines. They are part of the competitive puzzle. The Australia game is going to be a first in NFL history, and that alone makes it feel like a huge event. But from a football standpoint, it changes the rhythm of the entire season before it even gets rolling. It changes travel, recovery, timing, and how cleanly a team can settle into its usual flow. San Francisco 49ers news always has to talk about the little details that casual fans miss. And this one is a giant detail wearing a loud Hawaiian shirt. The Mexico City game brings a different kind of pressure. That one has the feel of a neutral site game disguised as a home game, and that is where you start asking the real questions. How much does the crowd tilt toward the 49ers? How much does it feel like Levi's West, or maybe Levi's South? And more important than all of that, does this kind of setup help or hurt when the season gets to its middle stretch? Because if you are a Niners fan, you do not just care about the game. You care about the conditions around the game. You care about whether the team is being set up to thrive or to survive. That is the difference between a fun schedule and a brutal one. So yes, this is the kind of San Francisco 49ers news that gets the blood moving early. The NFL schedule release is still coming, but the leaks already tell you this much. The Niners are not walking into a normal year. They are walking into a season with a global footprint, a strange travel map, and enough early intrigue to keep Niners news today buzzing all week. And the big question sitting right in the middle of it is not just where they play. It is how much all of this bends the season before the first snap even gets taken. The next layer is where things really start to crack open. Because the travel number is not just high, it is historic. And once you see that number, you start to understand why this schedule could be a lot more dangerous than it looks on the surface. Now here is where the story gets heavy, because this is not just a busy schedule. This is a mile-eating, time-zone-chewing, body-crushing kind of schedule. The number sitting out there for the San Francisco 49ers is 315 miles, and that would be the most travel any team has ever had in NFL history. That is not a small bump. That is a mountain. That is the kind of number that makes you blink twice and think, hold up, how did the league even land here? And the reason is not hard to understand. The Niners are based in Northern California, and that location alone already puts them in a tougher spot than teams in the middle of the country. If you are in Texas, the Midwest, or even the Southeast, a lot of your road trips are just cleaner. You are not constantly flying coast to coast and stacking up those ugly miles. But San Francisco? Every time this team has to go to New Jersey, Atlanta, Florida, or other far-flung spots, the mileage starts climbing fast. Then you throw in Mexico City. Then you throw in Melbourne. Suddenly, the schedule looks less like a football calendar and more like an international airline route. That is why the Australia game matters so much from a practical standpoint, not just a headline standpoint. The trip from the Bay Area to Melbourne alone is about 8,000 miles one way, and that is before you even deal with the weirdness of the time change, the ode recovery, and the fact that the game has to fit into a very specific Week 1 window. That is not just an inconvenience. That is a whole different animal. And from a football logic standpoint, it explains why Australia has never hosted a regular season NFL game before. You cannot just toss a game like that into the middle of the year and expect the rest of the schedule to bend politely around it. Football does not work like that, and the body definitely does not. The Mexico City game adds another layer. It is home, but not really home. It takes away a game from Levi's Stadium, and that means the 49ers lose the usual home field setup while still carrying the burden of travel. That is a sneaky little twist in the schedule, and it is the kind of thing that can matter later in the year when little edges start deciding bigger outcomes. A team like San Francisco needs every bit of structure it can get, especially if injuries start creeping in again. This is why Niners News and San Francisco 49ers. News always hammer the same point. Schedule details are not background noise. They are part of the season. And then there is the time zone part, which is almost absurd when you say it out loud. The Niners are expected to cross 58 time zones this season, which would also be the most ever in NFL history. That is 16 more than the previous record. 16. That is not a tweak. That is a full-on leap into the deep end. You do not need to be a sports scientist to know that can wear on a team, especially one that has already dealt with more than its fair share of injury trouble over the years. But here is the twist, and this is where a lot of people get tripped up. Travel is not automatically a death sentence. It is a problem, yes. It is a disadvantage, absolutely. But it does not guarantee failure. The NFL is full of teams that have been forced to travel a ton and still won a lot of games. That is the part the panic crowd sometimes forgets. Good teams can survive ugly conditions. Great teams can even thrive in them if the rest of the structure is right. So the real question is not just how many miles are they traveling. The real question is, what kind of rest are they getting on top of all this? That is where the schedule could either get brutal or get manageable. If the league stacks the mileage with a rest disadvantage, then yeah, that is a real headache. But if the Niners catch a decent rest setup, then suddenly all that travel becomes a challenge instead of a disaster. And there is a huge difference between those two things. That is what makes this Niners News Today conversation so important. On paper, this schedule is nasty. The miles are huge. The time zones are historic. The trips are long. But the NFL does not hand out wins based on spreadsheets alone. The 49ers still get to decide what they do with it. They still get to decide whether this becomes a burden or a badge of toughness. And that is where the story gets interesting for every Niners fan watching this unfold. Now, this is where the conversation shifts from panic to perspective, because the NFL may have handed the 49ers one of the craziest travel schedules the league has ever seen. But there is another side to this thing that matters just as much. The Niners are not some rebuilding team trying to survive. This is still a roster packed with high-end talent, playoff experience, star power, and guys who have already lived through pressure-packed seasons. That changes the equation. And here is the stat that should calm down at least part of the fan base. Last season, several of the teams with the heaviest travel schedules still piled up wins. The Chargers traveled over 37,000 miles and won 11 games. The Rams were near 35,000 and won 12. Seattle traveled over 31,000 and won 14 games. Jacksonville cracked 13 wins. Even San Francisco dealt with nearly 28,000 miles and still won double-digit games. So while the travel conversation is real, and it absolutely matters, history also says something important. Elite teams can survive chaos. That is why the full NFL schedule release matters so much more than people think. Everybody gets excited about primetime games, rivalry matchups, holiday football, and all the flashy stuff. But what smart Niners fans are going to look at immediately is the rest structure. Where are the short weeks? Where are the back-to-back road games? Do the Niners get extra recovery after Australia? Do they get crushed with an OEU, early East Coast turnaround? Those details decide whether this schedule is difficult or downright savage. And honestly, that part should frustrate fans a little because San Francisco has already dealt with some rough schedule setups in recent years. There have been seasons where the Niners got hit with ugly rest disadvantages, while other teams caught smoother paths. That stuff adds up over a 17-game season. Football is violent enough already. When one team is constantly operating on less recovery, less preparation time, and longer travel, eventually the body starts cashing those checks. But this is also where the mentality of the organization matters. Kyle Shanahan has coached teams through chaos before. This locker room has been through injuries, playoff pressure, quarterback drama, and brutal stretches of football. The core of this team understands what adversity looks like. And sometimes, weirdly enough, a difficult schedule can sharpen a contender early. It forces focus. It forces discipline. It forces teams to stop drifting mentally because every week feels important. And if we are being honest, there is another layer to this that every Niners fan secretly loves. The NFL clearly knows San Francisco moves the needle. You do not send random teams to Australia. You do not throw random franchises into massive international showcases. The league knows the 49ers bring ratings, history, energy, and fan turnout. That Mexico City game is going to look like a red and gold festival. The Australia game might feel like a Levi's Stadium takeover on another continent. That says something about the size of this fan base and the weight this franchise carries around the world. So when the full schedule finally drops, do not just look at the opponents. Look at the rhythm. Look at the recovery windows. Look at the sequencing. That is where the truth of the season starts hiding. Because if the NFL gives San Francisco a fair rest setup, this team absolutely has the talent to overcome the mileage. And if they start hot early, watch out. A confident 49ers team is one of the most dangerous teams in football, period. That is why this San Francisco 49ers news cycle feels different right now. There is uncertainty, there is pressure, there is curiosity, but there is also opportunity. The schedule looks brutal on paper, but paper does not tackle, throw passes, rush quarterbacks, or win games in January. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think the 49ers are being set up for a deep playoff run? Or do you think this schedule could wear them down over time? What is your early win prediction before the full slate even drops? Let me know down in the comments because this is the kind of Niners News Today conversation that separates the casuals from the real ones. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss any San Francisco 49ers news, breaking updates, or schedule reactions coming your way. We are pushing toward 2,000 subscribers, and every single Niners fan joining the channel helps this community keep growing stronger. Share the video with another member of the faithful, and stay locked in, because once that full schedule drops, we are going to break down every twist, every trap game, every primetime matchup, and every playoff implication right here on the channel.